but good afternoon. I'm Steve Clark, and my apologies for the delay in starting. It's part of the technical problems that emanate from me. And I'm the chair of the Princess Alexandra NHS Trust. So welcome to this, the first of our virtual AGMs, in which we will review the provisions we'll review last year, 1920, and look forward a little to next year. I shall hand over in a few moments to our Chief Executive, Lance McCarthy, who will lead off with the presentations. Just to say that at the end there will be some time for questions, and so I would encourage you to post any questions you might have during the course of the session onto the question and answer facility that will be on your screen somewhere. As we reflect on last year for our trust and all that our people have achieved and the high quality care they have provided every day to our patients, it's important for us to remember the unprecedented demands on all of us from the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. And we can expect those extraordinary challenges to continue for many more months to come through 2021. But at this point, I'd like to take the opportunity of the AGM to put on record our thanks to our amazing people who've responded with imagination and professionalism to extraordinary demands, and whose commitment to high quality care has continued to make a difference to the people they care for and the people they work alongside. We are proud to know that in the most difficult of circumstances, PAHT people have shown great resilience and compassion. I'd also like to thank our colleagues in the wider health and social care world, in the various organisations in general practice, community services and other acute sector, as well as our local authority colleagues, for their flexibility and support during these difficult times. But right now, I'm going to hand over to our Chief Exec, Lance McCarthy. And just a reminder, please do post your questions on the Q&A facility as we go along. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Steve, and welcome to everybody who's listening. This is being recorded as well and will be put up on our YouTube channel, so people are able to review it at a later date. So as Steve said, my name is Lance McCarthy, Chief Executive here at Princess Alexandra Hospital, and it gives me great pleasure to talk to you about review of 2019-20. It's always a little bit strange doing the AGM, given that the events that I'm about to review happened between 12 and 18 months ago, but particularly more unusual this year, given that they seem even longer ago, given their fantastic work and energy and effort, but impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on all of us over the last 6 months. But 2019-20, it was, as I've said there, an unusual year, a year of ups and downs. So right at the very start of the year, we had a formal CQC inspection, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but it showed some really fantastic improvements, and a credit to all 3,600 colleagues who are working really hard to provide high quality care for our patients. But then we had a CQC visit back in the early part of 2020, where we received a Section 29A warning notice around some of our urgent care, and Sharon McNally, Director of Nursing, Midwifery and AHPs, will pick that up a little bit later. We had the fantastic announcement of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a new hospital for Harlow on the 30th of September. I can remember it well, and for us to be part of the new government health infrastructure programme, and that's absolutely brilliant. And we've been working very, very hard on that over the last 6 months. And Michael Meredith, our Director of Strategy, will talk more about where we are with the developments around the new hospital later. We've continued to invest, obviously, to keep our patients and visitors and colleagues safe in the current environment, and spent over £17 million over the course of 1920 in that. Some fantastic development of services for our patients with our local health and care partners, and we'll pick more up about about that. And then right at the very end of the financial year 2019, from about the first or second week of March, the hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has created absolutely unprecedented demands and pressures on services, on our colleagues, on our patients, and obviously on the local population and communities. But an absolutely amazing response from everybody who's worked both at PAH, but also in all of our partner health and care organisations across the wider health and care system to manage and support our patients effectively. So an unusual year, as I've said. As usual, we continue to manage the organisation through our 5P model, our patients, putting our patients right at the very heart and centre of all that we do, and then work out from that what does that mean and impact on how we need to develop and support our people, what it ends up ultimately meaning in terms of our performance, our support for our places, and the impact that it has on our pounds. And we'll talk through each of those over the course of the next 20 minutes or half an hour or so. Just looking at numbers, just as a high level, 2019-20 and high level numbers for us looks like that. We continue to see an increasing level of demand for our services, linked to increases in the demographics and the local population. Despite a significant reduction in demand for our services in March as a result of COVID, we still saw nearly 110,000 ED attendances, which was up about 3.5% on the previous year. We saw 6,000 more outpatient consultations, or had 6,000 more outpatient consultations than in 2018-19, and admitted about 1,500 more patients. So huge ongoing demand for our services. And there you can see in the nurses and midwives employed, we recruited more than 200 additional nurses and midwives over the course of the year, significantly reducing our registered nurse vacancy rate by well over half. And I just want to use this as an opportunity to extend a further warm welcome to all of our 1920 new starters. And then finally on that slide there, you'll see that we posted a very small surplus, which is the first time we posted a surplus, I think, in about 6 or 7 years. And Simon Cover, our Acting Director of Finance, will talk a bit more about our financial position over 1920. So just a little bit more detail about CQC. So as I was saying early in the 2019 year, July, we received our formal scorecard. We had a formal CQC inspection through March and April. And as you can see, just from the changes there over the course of the 2.5 years, some really fantastic improvements in the quality of care that everybody is providing. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of our clinical colleagues for the care that they're providing and the energy and effort that has gone in over the last 3 years to transform some of the services. You can see from the scorecard on the right hand side, not a single rating that has been rated as inadequate, and very nearly 3/4 of that whole grid there rated either good or outstanding, which is a significant contrast, as you can see from the grid on the left, just 3 years ago. So a huge amount of investment, a huge amount of energy, and a huge amount of commitment from everybody to get us to that point, and we obviously continue to strive hard to continue to improve those services. In terms of performance generally against the key quality metrics and the key access targets was on the whole pretty good. You can see on that page there a concern around our mortality rate, so our hospital standardised mortality ratio, which continues to be higher than expected, but we have some very good service model changes, a very good set of quality improvement programmes that are continuing to improve this. But you can see friends and family scores consistently remaining very high, and then one-to-one care and labour consistently at 100% for all of our pregnant women. Our performance against the access standards was doing absolutely fantastically, and we were absolutely on target to that, as you can see on the next slide. Until we got hit with COVID and the COVID-19 pandemic, and you can see just from that the impact that COVID has had on our ability to be able to maintain all of our services, our elective services, and our access standards. So with the exception of the ED ED4-hour standard, we're performing very well and against or above plan and above target for all of those through to the end of February. I'll pick it up a little bit later this afternoon in terms of the impact of COVID, but COVID has definitely had a significant impact on the elective services that we will provide, and it will take a while for us to be able to get our performance back to where we would like it to be. Over the course of the year, we've seen that our people are happier. They have told us that through the staff survey. We've seen a significant improvement in most of the results from staff surveying at the early part of 2020, and staff significantly much happier with the quality of care that they provide and are able to and aspire to provide. But also some really importantly, some really big improvements our colleagues are saying in terms of the safety culture within the organisation and the level of staff engagement. I referred earlier to the fantastic work that's been undertaken to reduce our registered nurse vacancy rate, which is now down to 8%, and out of the less than 20%, which is the first time in about 4 years that we've had a less than 20% nurse vacancy rate. So a huge amount of energy and effort, and a huge welcome to all of those nurses, many from overseas. But that's really starting to help embed our services and our practices and the ways of working on our wards. Our staff are happier. Our people are happier. Turnover has reduced, and we have seen for the first time mandatory training over the course of the year be consistently above 90%, and our flu vaccination increased to 80%. And as well as our people being happier, we're investing a lot in both our people and in our places. So those are just a headline number of areas in which we invested heavily in 1920 to support our people. Importantly, I think just to pick a few of those, around expanded apprenticeships and a lot of opportunity for local residents to work in a very different way and to be interlinked with the organisation, but actually also huge opportunity for colleagues who are working with MPH and have for a while to extend their scope and skills and roles by undertaking apprenticeships as well. And the other one, the key one I wanted to mention, or two which are linked, is the Enhanced Employee Assistance Programme, Mental Health First Aiders, and that's obviously been particularly highlighted through COVID and the pressures, both in terms of physical and mental pressures and emotional pressures that our colleagues have been under. So the very fantastically enhanced employee assistance programme, supported by Mental Health First Aiders, to really support our people going forward. And we've invested in our places. So as well as the fantastic news about the new hospital, we need to keep our patients, visitors, and colleagues safe, and we also need to ensure that we're continuing to provide the best possible quality care that we can, and that will involve investing heavily our capital in the physical environment. And you can see some of the real key headlines there of things that we've spent £11 million on over the course of 1920, and we're continuing to spend with in excess of £40 million of capital to be spent during this financial year 2021. And then finally, from me at the moment, in addition to all of that, we're continuing to improve all of our services. We're continuing to work really hard to shift that CQC scorecard further towards good and towards outstanding, and we're underpinned with that and in that by the work from our Quality First team. We have a very, very clear quality improvement methodology. Continue to work closely with a very good internal training program, and you can see some of those really key programs there, but importantly starting to look at some really significant quality improvement programs that work across the system with our primary and community and social care colleagues. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll hand over to Sharon McNally, who will talk a little bit more about our quality and safety improvements during 2019-20. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Lance, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. Hello, my name's Sharon McNally, Director of Nursing, Midwifery and AHPs. As you'll see from the next slide, I just want to take the opportunity to talk you through the highlights and headlines relating to our patient safety, experience and quality over the last year. So I think fundamentally we've shown our commitment to continue to improve as an organisation and deliver the best possible service to our patients. And that's really cemented with an appointment of a new post to the organisation, a Director of Clinical Quality and Governance, who's been with us since for the last 8 months. So welcome to Finola Devaney, who's joined us within that role. And following on from Lance, I think the headline that I'd really like to pick out in terms of the informatics that you've got in front of you is that following on from the CQC, we have undertaken over the last year a full review of our quality governance framework and implemented a new framework which really substantiates and embeds the work that we've been doing. So the informatics really pull on some of the headlines that we've had over the last year that we've continued to work through as business as usual, despite the fact we've also been through an extraordinary time. And the levels you'll see there relating to patient safety and our legal claims are really in line with reported levels that we've had over previous years. The most important thing about all of this is that we demonstrate that we're a learning organisation and continue to improve our services. So in relation to that, if we just move on to the next slide. Our patient experience, if we talk our way through that in terms of how we've managed over the last year. So our patient experience team have continued to support our patients and our visitors and our advice and liaison service and their complaint handling. And above are some examples of that. We've improved our capture of compliments, and I'm delighted to see that we're now capturing close on 3,000 compliments that our staff are reporting and capturing from our patients and our visitors. We're really privileged and fortunate to be working with a fantastic group of volunteers who, along with our patient panel, have continued to give fantastic support during the year and indeed through our COVID period. So some examples of that, just for information, are we work in collaboration with the Anne Robson Trust, who support our butterfly volunteers, and they've been offering invaluable support to our patients and their family during our end of life. And we have also been supported by them for our Message to a Loved One initiative. Through the collaboration, we've also worked with the Red Cross and Project Wingman, to name just a few. We'd like to give a sincere thank you to all of the individuals in our voluntary organisations for all of the support that they have and dedication that they've continued to give to us. And I'm delighted to be able to include in this presentation the fantastic achievement of our patient panel, who achieved the Queen's Award for Voluntary Services in June of this year. It's a very much deserved award, and we're delighted that their work has been formally recognised. If we just go to our patient quality and service improvements, so you can see as a learning organisation, we continue to push forward, and over the last year we have looked at our falls prevention and strategy. We have looked at our pressure ulcer prevention and strategy. We've done a huge piece of work in terms of how we manage our patient property process, and that's significant learning for us about how you keep those relationships and communication going over a pandemic when you can't have visitors on site. And in line with our CQC report and our section 29, which Lance touched on, we've continued to, much as possible, put all of our documentation onto one platform. So we've continued to digitalise the patient documentation across the organisation. So if we move on to the next slide, we continue to pick up patient safety and priorities, and we are looking to cement some of the work we've already been doing and have set our stall for the next 2 years as we develop our quality strategy in terms of our patient safety priorities. So you can see some examples of those above, and they're related to learning this organisation's had and a real drive to want to improve in terms of where we are. So the next slide picks up in terms of our Care Quality Commission, which our CEO picked on at the beginning around this. So we did have a winter assurance visit in February of this year, and we received a Section 29A warning notice in relation to that. We have worked hard with our clinical team and indeed our partners in terms of addressing some of those concerns, and I'm pleased to say that we've made significant improvement around our service for gastrointestinal bleeds out of our service. And as I've already picked up on, we are continuing to, as much as possible, put our patient records within an electronic system, which is ease of access and be able to give a full view of our patient journey across this organisation. But we will absolutely continue to work on that, as we are indeed with our overarching quality improvement plan. And we plan to integrate that further over the next year. And our quality improvement plan is available on our website. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to hand over to Simon Coble now, the Acting Chief Finance Officer.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Firstly, my name is Simon Coble, Acting Chief Financial Officer, and welcome to everybody listening today and taking the time out to listen. I'm going to run through the financial results for 1920, and all of the numbers which I'm going to talk around are from our audited accounts, and a copy of those are available on the website, a full copy if people wish to review them. The first items that I want to cover is around our statutory requirements and our performance results in terms of financial outcomes. The first of which is our financial control total. So this is a control total that's set from us by our regulator, NHSI, and it's a control total around our revenue day-to-day running costs. So pleased to report that we overachieved against that control total. The second item is similar, our capital resource limit, again a limit against our capital expenditure, and another item that we successfully achieved during the financial year. Thirdly, our external financing limit. This is a limit against the level of external financing that we access, and that was an improvement, and we achieved that as well during the financial year, an improvement on last year as well. The next item is an unqualified opinion from our external auditors on the value for money assessment, and that is around assurance of proper financial arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness around the use of our resources. The organisation spends in the region of nearly £800,000 per day and takes its responsibilities and accountability very seriously in custodian of that taxpayers' money. Supplemented to that, around the value for money, we also have a current CQC rating around our use of resources, which is rated as good. So that reaffirms our position on the unqualified opinion. I'm now going to delve a little bit further into some of the numbers that underpin some of those results. The first of which is our operating, our I&E account. So our operating income, as Lance has mentioned, around about £288 million, and our expenditure this year was just £50,000 shy of that. So that's a surplus there, as you can see on that slide, of £50,000. A small surplus, albeit a very proud achievement. That is our first surplus since 2012-13. So a significant improvement for the organisation in terms of its financial standing and results. If we move forward now, the next slide is just a little bit of information for the audience around where our money comes from. In terms of how we generate our income, and you can see from that slide around about 72% of our income base, about 288 million, is derived from our contracts that we have with our two local CCGs, being West Essex and Eastern North Herts, and they pay us for services for the catchment population, for the healthcare services that they purchase off of us. If I move around that pie chart, then in essence we also have some other income from CCGs, from North London in particular, and some of the other CCGs in the south of the patch and in Essex. We receive a level of funding for education and training, and also some funding from NHS England, which relates to our specialist commissioning services. I'd also like to mention in that other column, although very small in terms of the revenue, it includes income for research and development. We have a very active and buoyant, with a high reputation in terms of our research and development function, and that generates some 600k as well. If I take that slide forward, and we move across from where our money comes from, now I'd just like to move on to how do we spend our money, how do we spend the taxpayers' money. At a very high level, you can see 67% of our expenditure is on pay, and staff being our most valuable asset. Our average workforce strength across 1920 was just above 3,600, and that workforce has a combined NHS experience of some 40,000 years looking after and caring for patients. The other element is obviously non-pay that we spend money on in terms of clinical resources and consumables. And if I take the slide further forward, I've broken down further for you there some more detail around the pay on the left hand side and the breakdown of the non-pay of that, and that gives the components of where our money is spent in terms of the workforce groups on the left hand side there and how that's made up. And on the right hand side on the pie chart, again, where we're spending our non-pay money, mainly around the clinical supplies and the drugs, and around clinical negligence and some depreciation charges, as well as the upkeep on the day-to-day of the estate and the running of services. So if we move forward in terms of the next slide, what we have here is a little bit of a historical track of our income and expenditure performance, and I said at the start, we're really proud in terms of the achievements and the reductions that we've had in the deficit moving forward. You can see there from 15-16 our deficit was actually running at nearly 41 million pounds, significant proportionate to our turnover, and gradually through the years we've eaten away at that and improved our position. And as I said, in this 1920 financial results, we achieved a 50k surplus, and that was our actual plan was a deficit plan of 6.2 million, so well ahead of the position which was set to us, and a significant achievement for us in terms of financial results. If I take forward some of the things that underpin how those results were delivered were around our cost improvement and efficiency programs, and also including importantly transformation of services. And again, you can see from that bar chart our historic trends around cost improvement, in particular 1920 delivering 9.9 million pounds worth of efficiency, cost improvement and transformational programs. So that helps obviously support and underpin our improved financial position and results. The next slide is around a little bit of a breakout more on our capital expenditure. We've got four real sort of main components around capital. As Lance said, our investment in capital over the year, 17 million pounds. And that's an increase from the 11 million pounds or 12 million pounds that we had in 18-19. So a significant increase in investment. We recognise we've got backlog maintenance. People will be aware of the estate condition. We have to invest to keep that and remedy that and make sure that environment is safe. So that's a component of our expenditure. Likewise, we've made some significant investments in IT infrastructure and improving the infrastructure and the technologies in the organisation to ensure our patients are safe. And also developments on medical equipment, so some real large items of medical equipment purchased during the year, and that's been pleasing and for the environment and for our patients. Final one is around the estates developments, and that's around the fracture clinic and other items moving forward, and developments on the hospital site, which I know people have seen and have been involved in. And likewise, we had some new accommodation facilities for our staff. That slide is around some of the pictures of the things that we've done. So investments in the plant and machinery, the medical equipment and the IT, as well as some significant investments in the refurbishment of wards and improving the environments for our patients and staff. So I think finally from me, just a little bit on looking ahead into next year. As Lance said, we have an increased capital programme, even from the 17 million pounds this year, that will rise to 45 million pounds. Some of that will be around planning for our new hospital development, and also a new adult assessment unit is planned for before winter on the site. We wish to continue to drive for efficiency and transformation. and continue to work and are grateful for the work we do with our system partners and integrated work across the system to transform services across our STP footprint. And finally, from me, before I hand across to Michael Meredith, a bit of our financials will be around preparing the assessment of the new hospital development. That's an exciting development that Princess Alexandra Hospital has had in its history. So we'll be running some numbers and planning for the financial aspects of that in terms of moving that forward. So with that said, thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm going to hand across to Michael, who'll talk more around the new hospital development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. And in a seamless transition from talking about the finances behind our estate, I'm Michael Meredith, Director of Strategy and Estates for Princess Alexandra, and I'm going to give you an overview of where we are in the development. As Simon said, our once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to develop a brand new hospital for the people that we serve. So since the last AGM, what's happened? Wow. What a year. It's been an amazing year. It's been a really challenging year. I'm very proud to say that the executive team and the board have got behind the development of the new hospital, even in the face of the adversity that we have faced with COVID-19. It's been a real challenge, but we recognise this is a really, really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the organisation, and we need to get behind it. So a lot has happened. As Lance mentioned, in September, we had a visit from the Prime Minister. He came onto the site. Pretty much the next day, we got a phone call from the Secretary of State for Health saying that we had won a prize. We are part of the HIP1 programme. That's the Health Infrastructure Programme. We're one of 6 organisations in the country that is going to get finance for a brand new hospital. We're really proud to be involved. We think it's an amazing opportunity for us. However, and there was one however, the key challenge from the Prime Minister was to have their facility built by 2025. That may seem like a long way away, but there's a lot of planning to be done. We have an amazing vision for our new hospital. If you can move to the next slide, please. We have an amazing vision for our new hospital. It's going to be a hospital on a greenfield site. It's going to be technology enabled. It's going to be the most technology enabled hospital in the country when it's built, and it's going to be in an absolutely world-class building. I've set out some of the key challenges that we face, but for me, the key challenge for us really is it needs to improve our performance. It needs to significantly improve our performance. If the country is going to invest in this massive piece of infrastructure, then we really have to improve our performance. But more important than our performance, it needs to transform the care that we deliver to our patients. And as important to that, it needs to transform the environment we need to make it an amazing place for our people to work. And in order to do that, in order to transform our performance and be an amazing place to work, in order for us to really improve outcomes for patients across East and North Herts and West Essex, we have to make sure we're delivering services in a much more integrated way. So we're working in a really integrated way with all of our partners, not only to design the building and the infrastructure, but to make sure we're co-designing and developing our models of care. So how are we going to get there? So this is a massive investment. This is one of the biggest pieces of public sector infrastructure investments in the country after some railway that they're building somewhere. So this is a huge investment for us over HS2. We need a significant team in order to deliver it. So we've got a big team involved. We're working right across both the HR, the workforce, communications and engagement, clinical project development. We've got a huge team all working collaboratively to develop this hospital, and we're aiming to have the hospital completed by 2025. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. So it's really, really important to us as a team that it's not just our ideas, that we're involving our patients and the public in developing our hospital. We've been listening. We run a range of events with a number of different organisations and a number of different individuals, and we've heard some really amazing things. So yes, it has to deliver high quality care. We absolutely get that. That's a given. It needs to be world-class care that we're delivering from a world-class facility. But what we've been hearing from our patients and our staff and our service users and people in the community is it needs to be more than that. It has to meet their holistic needs. Not only does it have to be a place that you can be treated well, it has to be a place that you feel cared for. It has to be a place you feel nurtured. It has to be a place that is that brings the outside in, that makes you feel like you are a whole person again, rather than just a patient being treated. It has to be a healing environment. It has to be relaxive. It has to be a place that you can relax, and a place that you can grow, and a place that you can become one again. So how are we going to get there? As I mentioned at the top, it's an extremely challenging timeline. I've set out a timeline here for you. We have to have our hospital built by 2025. So we are well on our way on that journey now. We have to have our OBC completed by sort of spring next year. So we're working right across the whole program now to make sure we can have our outline business case completed by next spring. And the outline business case means we have our drawings of our building down to 1 in 200. That's the walls and the doors. By the following spring, or the following summer, we have to have our full business case completed. That means we have to have our 1 in 50 drawings, and that's all of the equipment, that's all of the sinks, that's all of the plug sockets, that's all the wall coverings right across the building. So a really, really challenging timeline. Then we have about a 3.5 year build process to get the hospital ready for us to move into and start delivering services. So what am I proud of? What am I proud of as the leader of this program? Do you know what? I'm mostly proud of our people. The engagement, the clinical engagement that I've had from right across the business has been unbelievable. We've been working really, really hard to develop our clinical model, and our clinicians have been working not just within the hospital, but outside the hospital, right across the system, to ensure this model of care is truly world-class. It has to be really, truly world-class. And that model of care really, really is innovative. We've been making sure we bring technology in, been making sure we use the built environments the best we can to really transform the way we deliver care. I'm also proud of our public engagement. I touched on it in the last slide. We've been working with a range of people from across the system, and we're not going to stop there. We've got a big planned public engagement that has already started, but we plan to engage everybody as we continue to develop our plans for the hospital, both through our OBC, FBC, and beyond, through the build process, and then as we start to deliver our services. We've got a huge public engagement program planned, and we want everyone to be involved. I'm also really proud of the innovation that we're driving through the hospital. It is truly going to be a service fit for the 21st century. We are going to use technology. We're talking about using automated vehicles for moving things around the building. We're talking about how we can really use technology to transform the care we deliver and really make it a better place to work. And finally, from what I'm proud of, there's so much I could have listed all day, but actually I'm really proud of the design that's emerging. We're planning to be the first net zero carbon hospital in the country. We are challenging ourselves, and it is a challenge. We hope to be the very first all-electric hospital in the country, and that is a real challenge, but we're really pushing towards that. So I'm really proud of the design that's emerging. And I'm also really proud of the aesthetic design. We don't just want this to be a square block on top of a hill. We want this to be an amazing design that the people of Harlow and around can be really, really proud of. Okay, so finally, how can you get involved? We want to continue to involve you guys. And a little plug for our website. We've got a little microsite. You can see the address on this slide. Please go to our microsite and find out what's happening. Please go to our microsite and find out how you can be involved. We really, really do want you guys to be involved as we continue on this really exciting journey. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand back to Lance.
Thank you very much, Michael. And as you can see and hear from everybody that you've heard in the last 35-40 minutes or so, 2019-20 was a good and unusual year. Absolutely fantastic improvements for our patients in terms of experiences and outcomes, and some really great improvements for our people. But we're not resting on our laurels. As you just heard from Michael, in terms of the size and the scale and the scope of the new hospital, the transformation requirement that is needed for us to really truly deliver outstanding care is enormous. And we've got a structure here about how we will be looking at that and driving that going ahead, with a very clear vision about delivering outstanding healthcare to our local community, but importantly delivered through 3 key goals in all that we do, to make sure that we're outstanding, to make sure that we're as integrated as possible across our local health and social care system in everything that we do and all the care that we provide for our patients, and to ensure that everything we do is up to date and modern and underpinned by our 5 Ps and our 4 values. We developed a plan a good few years ago, a couple of years ago, to help us get to outstanding. So whilst we were in special measures to work through what do we need to do against our 5P framework to get us to outstanding, and we're making very, very good progress on that, and we're on the edge of the good and edge of the 2 to 3 year time frame as well. And we're developing this further. So we're about to launch PHT 2030, which is a 10-year plan for how are we going to get to this, of which integration is at the heart. So as you can see from this slide, it's too much detail to read it, but the point of this slide is showing that everything that we do is driving towards that being outstanding, but equally everything we're doing is driving towards working closely and in conjunction with our local health and care partners, with the West Essex One Health and Care System, through our integrated care system or sustainability and transformation partnership, and everything linked up to the NHS long-term plan. And we will be launching, as I said, very shortly, our PHT 2030, which is our 10-year plan to develop this, which builds upon all of those items that I've just talked about. And you can see there, I won't go through each of them, but you can see the key areas of focus for all of us over the next 10 years as we put the patients right at the centre, think about how we manage our care differently, think about how we manage ourselves differently, and ensure we get those outstanding outcomes and those outstanding experiences for all of the users of our services. Thank you for listening. Now, whilst technically the vast majority of the impact of COVID-19 has fallen in the 2021 year, it has obviously completely turned all of our lives upside down in one way, shape or form over the last 6 months. And we all pretty much do things in a different way. We think about things in a different way. We're anxious about different things now than we were 6 months ago. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just to pay tribute to the fantastic response that all of our staff have put in through some very, very difficult times and a completely unprecedented situation. We've had a huge number of people who've worked in a fundamentally different way, in different teams, with colleagues they haven't known before, in areas that they haven't really worked before, and whilst understandably having significant levels of anxiety and concern. We've done some really genuinely transformative things to support our patients through the idea of having a respiratory emergency department front door separate from the main emergency department. A huge amount of energy and effort driven by our senior nursing colleagues to completely reorganise the hospital so that we can protect our patients and our people as much as possible. Fantastic approach to moving outpatient consultations online. We shifted from less than 10% of our outpatient consultations online to more than 90% over the space of 2-week period. And at the same time, working really hard to maintain our urgent and cancer surgery. To reflect the size and scale of the effort, at one point in the second week of April, we were running critical care capacities at 6.5 times, 650% more than our normal critical care capacity. Which is a huge achievement and a huge credit to all of our ITU, HDU, anaesthetic, theatre nursing, and many other colleagues, nursing, medical, and AHP colleagues, and support colleagues who really enabled that to happen. We treated around about 500 known positive COVID patients over the last 6 months or so, and unfortunately 211 of those individuals died at PAH as a result of COVID-19, and so the impact has been huge, and the impact of that is obviously huge on those individuals' families, those individuals' friends, and obviously on all of the colleagues at PAH who worked really hard to support and manage their care. The impact has also been huge on many other patients. So we're very aware that we cancelled a lot of our elective surgery, and that has pushed our waits out to be much longer than normal. We have seen some increased waits around the management of our cancer patients and the timeliness in which we see our local population who have cancer diagnoses, and in the diagnosis of cancer. And we have seen a huge physical and mental impact on all of our colleagues. And of course, the very, very sad loss of two of our colleagues in particular, Lindsay Coventry and Simon Bulgrami, who died of COVID-19. And obviously our thoughts continue to go out to their families and their friends, and obviously all the colleagues that they worked with. I'd just like to take 5 or 10 seconds just quickly to as a moment to reflect on this, and only the loss of Lindsay and Simon, but also the loss of others that we know due to both COVID-19 and non-COVID-19 during the year. So thank you. We have got planned our staff awards in a few weeks' time, and as part of the staff awards, there is a formal recognition of all colleagues that have sadly died in the last year from both COVID and non-COVID reasons. So if you have the ability to dial into that or log into that and express your sympathies, then please do. And then finally, what are we doing to try and recover and restore some of our services? So as well as the huge amount of energy and effort that has gone into reorganising the hospital to manage COVID, there's been an enormous amount of energy and effort that's gone into the hospital to reorganise it to manage ourselves, to be able to recover and restore the services back to the normal levels that we would expect to provide and members of the public would expect to receive. We have plans in place to get back to more than 90% of our usual levels of elective and day case activity over the next 6 weeks or so. We have a third endoscopy room that's enabled us to increase our throughput greater than normal, and back to should be greater than 100% of normal throughput, so we can increase our diagnostic capacity. And as you can see, a number of plans, and as Simon referred to, a 2-storey acute assessment facility that is just about to be built, which will be open by January to support the flow of our urgent care patients into the hospital, and a lot of other work to support managing critical care facilities in a different way, our level 1 facilities, and importantly to support our colleagues, a lot of work to make sure we can enhance staff facilities for both rest and multi-faith space. And I just want to finally say, in response to the response from all colleagues over the last 6 months around COVID, an enormous thanks. It's been an absolutely amazing response from clinicians and non-clinicians alike across the whole organisation to really put our patients at the centre and manage a very, very difficult situation in very unprecedented times. And there's just a couple of minutes video here that our communications team have pulled together, just talking to a couple of or three or four of our colleagues who've got some stories about what they did differently over the last 6 months to support our patients.
My name is Cherie, and I'm a biomedical scientist in microbiology. If I'd have been told at the beginning of this year that I would spend most of this year working with just one virus, I wouldn't have believed it. Microbiology have played a pivotal role in the testing of samples for COVID-19, and yes, it's been relentless, all-consuming, challenging, changing, tiring, but there have been some highs. The taking it in turns to buy the coffee, the motivational post-it notes, the chocolates just because, and the regular check-ins from colleagues, some of who I'd never met before. I hope that, despite the devastation of COVID-19, we, as a trust, can move forward together, a closer team.
Hello, my name's Joy Marchington and I manage the Powers and Complaint Services for the Trust. As we saw COVID-19 come across the world, the team made plans in preparation for when lockdown came, so when it did come, we was able to move off-site. Sadly, as we lost the face-to-face interaction with the patients and visitors, 50% of my team were redeployed because the workload decreased. Since March, the patient experience team have been working from home, and with the support of IT and our trust colleagues, we have continued to provide business as usual. Working from home has had its challenges. My husband and 2 teenage boys have also been working from home or homeschooling. However, we seem to have worked into a routine. As a team, we have supported each other through emails, telephone calls and WhatsApp group messages, and I think we've all struggled, some more visibly than others. The The country is slowly returning to normality, and with the boys going back to school and college, I'm looking forward to the patient experience team back on site.
Challenging time has come success from the voluntary services. We have Ali with us, one of our volunteers, who has given us 600 hours since the start of COVID. Being part of the team that set up Message to a Loved One way back in April, I still feel very humbled and privileged to be delivering this crucial service for families and patients every single day. And we have Jenny. Jenny was redeployed to our team and has made an amazing difference to what we can produce and the care that we can give to our patients.
Initially I worked from home and I found it very isolating, so I was really grateful to be redeployed into other areas and just putting names to faces and see how other teams work, especially working for filling voluntary services and doing the virtual visiting. It was so rewarding to be able to connect patients and their families.
Enormous thanks to everybody and for everything over the course of 2019. Thank you hugely to all of our patients. Thank you massively to the local public and the community who continue to support us. Thank you very much to all of our health and care partners who we've worked really closely with over the course of the year. But above all, an enormous thank you to all of our amazing people, all of our amazing volunteers for your professionalism, your commitment, your resilience, and your compassion, and for putting our patients first and delivering some really fantastic services. Thank you very much. So hopefully that was useful and informative. We've got a section and opportunity now for questions and answers. So please, there's a little box in your pop-up, a couple of square boxes with a question mark in called Q&A. Please, if you've got any queries or questions for myself, any of the speakers, or any others of the executive team, or Steve as our chairman, then please pop the question in there, and we will attempt to answer them. So there's been a number of questions that have already come up. So just working down from the top, a question about, is the capital funding provided externally, including funding for the new hospital business case? So yes, so part of our £45 million that we will be spending over the course of this financial year, 2021, there is the funding that we have received as being part of the health infrastructure program, government's health infrastructure program. There is the money that we need to get ourselves to outline business case in line with the timeline that Michael was talking about. So the costs for us to get to OBC, and then should the OBC be approved to get to full business case, have been agreed by the national team and by Treasury. A question there about a roll call or moment silence in remembrance of colleagues who've passed over the last year. So as I was saying, yes, we have that planned to undertake that formally through our staff awards in a few weeks time. So John, thank you very much for your question regarding audiology. So obviously audiology is plugged into the new models of care services and ways of working going forward. And audiology is clearly a fundamental service that needs to provide and underpin and support our patient care and patient services. So yes, obviously we currently provide services both in the Harlow site, the St Margaret site, and at Herts and Essex site as well. And as we continue to do the work over time, we'll continue to look at what services we provide from what sites. And then a query again about how we're going to recognise our colleagues who have died from COVID-19, and also more broadly, how do we continue to recognise our colleagues who passed whilst in service at PAH. So those are the only questions at the moment. Don't be shy. Oh no, sorry, apologies. A question from Rob Gurlis. So Rob, thanking everybody for a year of closer working and relationships with colleagues, particularly during this unprecedented time. So thanks very much, Rob, who is the chair of West Essex CCG, and yes, as Simon has said there, a big reciprocal thanks actually. So colleagues in primary care have really pulled out the stops to support local population through COVID, but also to support us and to support the flow of patients into and out of the hospital during that time as well. So thank you, Rob, for your leadership and for all the hard work of your colleagues as well. And a question there about, are there plans to go back to the trust uniform soon? So for those of you who know the trust well, who work in the trust, will know that most colleagues have been working in scrubs during the COVID period, and as Sharon has responded there, we've stayed in scrubs over the summer due to the expectation around the heat and the potential COVID-19 position, and we will obviously continue to keep the uniforms and the scrubs review in check, or we'll keep it reviewed rather over the next few months and as we get into winter. Also continuing to look at how do we make it more visible to all of our patients and visitors exactly who's who, what roles do they undertake. Question there, is the new hostel for clinical staff only with others at KO Park? No, not quite. Michael, do you want to expand upon that a little bit?
Sure, thanks, Lance. No, exactly right, Lance. It won't be for just for clinical staff. There will be non-clinical staff, non-direct patient-facing staff on the site. We are looking to really transform our new ways of working. So we are looking to be as agile as we possibly can, particularly in light of COVID. But there will be admin space at the new site. However, we will be looking to make sure that those services that don't need to be on the site aren't on the site, and in our really, really high quality facilities at KO Park. We've made a significant investment there, and they are absolutely superb facilities to work in. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So, are there any other questions, queries that anybody listening would like to raise or ask? It's an opportunity to ask any queries of anybody, any of the executive team. Just while people are thinking about that, we touched on the development of the acute assessment unit. So colleagues have been working hard for a good while within the organisation to understand how best to manage our urgent care patients and ensure effective, safe flow into and through the hospital, and have been developing and building a case for a new integrated adult acute assessment facility. We have received £9.5 million from the centre to be able to fund a two-storey building, and work is shortly about to start at the front of the hospital next to, for those of you who know the site, next to Charnley Ward, and just opposite the ED department. There will be two stories, and we are expecting the first story to be open shortly before the end of this calendar year, and the second story to be open during January. It will be an integrated adult assessment facility, both medical, surgical and gynecological patients being managed effectively and safely by senior clinicians, enabling easier and more effective flow out of the ED department, reduce crowd in the ED, and importantly ensure patients are seen in a more timely fashion by the most appropriate clinician to make decisions on their care before either being discharged or being moved into an inpatient facility elsewhere in the hospital. So fantastic opportunity for us to reshape the way that we provide our care and improve the quality of care to our patients, and it will be here very soon. So a question there, does the Trust expect to retain a presence on the current site and the other two sites when the new hospital is built? So I'll hand over to Michael again for a little bit more detail in a second, but we will definitely maintain a presence at the St Margaret site and at the Herts and Essex site, and we are looking at the requirement to support the local Harlow population about what would remain on the current site. Michael, is there anything you wish to add to that?
Thanks, Lance. So we are working through the clinical model. We're working really, really closely with the CCG, and we're also working with NHS Property Services to understand exactly what we will be delivering on the main site and what we'll be delivering on the 2 satellite sites. That will be driven by the clinical model. That won't be driven by primarily by financial considerations, and it'll be looking at the population need. That'll be the prime drivers. Lance, there was another question there on, have the new hospital plans been finalised? Absolutely not. We are working in detail with all of our clinicians at the moment to understand the clinical adjacencies, understand the services that need to be delivered, get our schedule of accommodation. That's understanding how many rooms we need in order to build into the new hospital, and how they fit together and work best together. As we go into our FBC process, then we'll get into the real detailed design of how the internal part of the building works, how the flow through the building works, and how each of the individual departments work. We've appointed 2 architects. We're working with 2 architects, 1 Scandinavian architect and 1 UK architect, who are helping us with those designs, and we're reserving the right to go out to a design competition as we go through the design and build process. So absolutely haven't been finalised, but the one thing I can reassure you about is that we'll be working really, really closely with clinicians to make sure we get it right, and we'll be working really, really closely with our patients and population to ensure that it meets their needs as well. So yeah, we're still working on it.
Thank you very much, Michael. I've got what looks like a little bit of an interview question, actually. What are the CEO's personal standout performance improvements over the last year, please? But I'm really being put on the spot. So to be honest, I don't want to identify any individual specific department for their performance improvements, but the 2 things that I am really genuinely most proud of over the 1920, well, in fact, over the last 18 months or so. The first is that massive improvement on the CQC scorecard, because that is a huge amount of people. That's pretty much everybody in the organisation, all 3,600 people working really hard, really differently, and you've seen almost every single one of those service lines improve, and you've seen improvement. You can see improvements in that scorecard across each of the individual domains of care that we provide, or that the CQC measure us on. So hugely proud of that, because that requires a huge organisational effort and a real drive and a real centering of the patient at the front of everybody's mind. And the second, if I'm allowed a second, is our colleagues' response, absolutely amazing response to the COVID-19 pandemic over the last 6 months, which has been truly astonishing, and really supported our patients, supported their relatives, some really innovative ways of thinking, and a huge amount of support for colleagues during what have been very difficult times for everybody. So those would be the 2 things that I would call out from a personal perspective as things that I've generally been most proud to have seen and to have led the organisation through. A question there, seeing the trust advertised for an executive IT director, is this for the new hospital or permanent? So you are correct, we have advertised for a chief information officer for the organisation. And as you can will have been able to tell in terms of the size and scale of the transformation that we need to make to support the new hospital, it's enormous. But we also have an enormous technology and digital transformation to make if we're truly going to make it as easy as possible for our staff to provide care, to free up as much time for all of our clinical colleagues to provide hands-on clinical care, and to take away many of the burdensome administrative tasks, and importantly to be able to manage the flow of patient information and the detailed patient information effectively, and to utilise that data to be able to better enable us to continue to develop and change our services. So there's a huge amount that we need to do to continue to improve the digitisation of the organisation and the technology, and that's just on the patient side, let alone the technology to support having a healthy building, maximise our efficiencies, and free up as much revenue as possible to be able to reinvest back in our into our clinical services. So it's a permanent role. And we will are continuing to recruit to that role. What will happen to the current PH site when the new hospital opens? Will it be for outpatients or out of hospital only? I think that's probably already been answered in a detailed response. That Michael gave. And what are we doing as a trust to address the concerns for our BAME staff and to ensure there's true equity at all levels? So that's a very good question, and obviously very pertinent at the moment. So we've had a number of very detailed conversations about this at board level and executive through the executive team over the last couple of weeks, and it is very clear that as we got to the point of describing it, is bordering on an injustice in terms of the negative impact that COVID has, for example, on BAME colleagues compared to non-BAME colleagues, but also the feeling and views of our BAME colleagues compared to our non-BAME colleagues, and our apparent inability to be able to address or change that over time. So our staff survey results in the last 4 years have continued to improve year on year, which is fantastic, but the difference and the delta in the responses between our BAME colleagues and our non-BAME colleagues has remained the same year on year. So whilst they've all shifted up, which is fantastic, there is still a difference between how our BAME colleagues feel within the organisation and how our non-BAME colleagues feel. We have started a whole series of genuine open conversations and genuine listening to all of our colleagues, but BAME in particular, to understand the levels of microaggression or the levels of concern that they have and experience on a day-to-day basis, which if, like me, you're a white male, you don't experience. So I've got a lot to learn. I've been very open and honest with my BAME colleagues that I have a lot, BAME network colleagues, that I have a lot to learn about it. And we have a commitment as an executive team and as a board to work really hard with everybody to reduce the inequality and the injustice around BAME, but not just about BAME, importantly, any inequality that any staff member sees themselves in from any of the protected characteristics. So there's an absolute commitment from myself and from our executive colleagues that we will change the dialogue and change the way that we talk about it within the organisation. And I think hopefully I've largely addressed the next query about the ME groups more affected during COVID. What we're doing to respond to this. Every staff member, almost every staff member, has now had a personal COVID-19 risk assessment. I think in excess of 93%, I think, have now had personal risk assessments undertaken, and obviously decisions based on appropriate areas for colleagues to work, and ensuring that all colleagues understand how to use which PPE to utilise and how to utilise and wear their PPE appropriately will have been undertaken with those colleagues, so that we can make sure we make the right decisions based on everybody's risk, regardless of whether you're BAME or not. And thank you, Just Sketch. Amidi just add in some additional comments there about the risk assessments and working with BAME staff network leads to address bullying and harassment and systemic issues that are related to recruitment and access to training. And a question from Rodney Allen. We can't know the future, but a second spike may happen, and we've left the EU. How do I, Simon, Sharon, and others see the next 12 months, please? Blimey, if I only had a crystal ball, Rodney. So I think the next 12 months will be a challenge for sure. So we don't know whether there will be a second spike, but we are certainly prepared for an increase in COVID-19 activity in COVID-19 cases. So we're trying to manage, obviously, the really important topic of restoration and recovery of our clinical services as much as possible, while also planning in the background for the potential to be able to manage another COVID spike. As you say, we don't know. Well, we will have left the EU. The Brexit issue seems to have been going on, feels like, for decades, but we will have left the EU by the early part of the next calendar year, and we don't know if we're truly honest, we don't know what impact that will have on us in terms of the impact on our ability to provide healthcare. But as I'm sure you'll be aware, Rodney, supported by our Emergency Planning and Resilience Officer, we have undertaken across the organisation a large number of events to make sure that we're as safe and secure as we possibly can be in terms of supplies and in terms of supporting colleagues from Europe, European colleagues to remain in the country, etc., to ensure that we can continue to provide our services as effectively as possible. And we've got to manage and do all of that at the same time as we've got to make some really significant transformations to everything that we do, both our clinical services and our non-clinical services, to really ensure that we maximise the care that we provide to our patients and that we truly get ourselves to outstanding. So a lot to do. Simon, Sharon, given that the question is also specifically directed to you, anything else that you would like to add, or anything else that you think in terms of particular specific challenges that we have coming up in the next 12 months?
I think, Lance, is just to echo the how agile we'll need to be, obviously, if there is a second spike, and revert the plans accordingly. So yeah, we recognise that we have to be versatile, flexible and adaptable if that happens. So in terms of the reaction to that, as far as EU, I would just say specifically, a lot of work happens with our regulators around protecting supply chain and ensuring that the supply chain is not interrupted during Brexit, basically. So yeah, there are measures in place around that. So, and thanks for the question, Rodney.
Yeah, and for me, nothing much to add. So thank you very much for the information, Lance and Simon. So the only other thing I would add is that we are keeping a close eye on the recruitment market and the borders and our workforce demands over the next year, and we're tracking those through, and there's lots of support nationally around that.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Sharon. There's another question there about any plans for shielders if there's a second wave. We were shut in for 4 months. It's been very unnerving rejoining society and returning to work. So yes, and I think if we're completely honest, we didn't quite get it right for everybody who shielded. So from me, apologies. So we have learned a lot from having conversations with a number of colleagues who have shielded, both in terms of the obvious frustrations and anxieties that you've had about not being able to come in and support your colleagues and to support our patients, about the obvious personal anxieties that you've had remaining at home, and in some instances, I'm disappointed to say, the lack of contact that you have had with your line manager or with colleagues within the organisation. So apologies for that. We have learned a huge amount, as you said. If there is a second wave, then we will be supporting our shielded colleagues in a very different way, and we're always working hard to try and help and support everybody back into the organisation as much as possible. The hospital is a safe environment in most areas. There is a requirement and expectation, obviously, as everybody knows, to wear a surgical mask in all non-clinical areas, and particularly if you're not able to, obviously, remain within or be within or you can't remain 2 meters apart as part of the social distancing. Many of the office spaces are now COVID secure, although not all. And if you're not in a COVID secure area, obviously the requirement to wear a mask during this period of time. But we're doing everything possible to make the site as safe as possible for our patients, for our visitors, for our colleagues, and obviously importantly for colleagues who have spent 4 or 5 months at home and are returning, which I can only imagine is daunting and will be causing levels of anxiety. And as I said again, apologies for those who didn't have the best experience in terms of ongoing contact with line managers or members of the organisation. as BAME staff member, I appreciate your response and honesty. Thank you. Is the working from home arrangements going to end at some point, or is this going to be the new normal? It's what the COVID pandemic has shown us is that actually we can work in very different ways, and we need to work in very different ways. But it's also shown us that there is the ability to be able to work from home more effectively than I think many of us thought possible for many roles. Our HR colleagues and people colleagues are working very hard to develop some genuine agile working and put some clear support in place to enable, where it makes sense for roles to be undertaken safely and effectively from a home environment, that we can enable that to happen where it makes sense into the future. And we need to get the balance right, obviously, between being able to support colleagues working at home, ensuring that they do have that interaction with other colleagues, and then certainly in the immediate term ensuring that the colleagues are safe and feel safe coming into any of the hospital sites. But yes, there will be an opportunity, significant opportunities for home working to continue into the future where it is appropriate and where it is possible. One from Raj, thank you. How will the organisation support its staff with the resilience they require to rise to the challenge of a second wave of COVID-19? Yeah, very good question. And I'll hand over to Getch in a second to talk through a little bit of the health and wellbeing issues and solutions that we've put in place. But as you're right, you know, that's a huge challenge. The first wave was a huge challenge, and a second wave will be another significant challenge. Obviously, there's a lot that we can do to support that, just in terms of things that and conversations that we've had in the last few months, Raj, around things that have gone really well and things that didn't go quite so well, and decisions that were made that were very good decisions, and other decisions that we need to unwind, such at the start of any potential second peak or second wave. We'll be able to move much more quickly and much more effectively into an environment that enables us to care for our patients more quickly, without a lot of the thinking that had to go in. And I know you're instrumental, Raj, in some of that thinking about how do we change and provide some of our services in different ways. So we've learned a huge amount. Obviously, we've also learned a huge amount about the disease itself and about how we manage that. And then obviously that will help us largely in terms of taking away quite a lot of that anxiety and quite a lot of that adrenaline pumping that we all experienced through March and April, before it started to stabilise slightly through May. There's obviously support for staff. You will be aware of the increase in the multi-faith facilities. You'll be aware of the increase in our enhanced employee assistance programme. You'll be aware of the increase in our staff facilities to enable proper high-quality rest facilities. You'll be aware of some of the clinical changes to support the flow in terms of separating out our level 3 facilities for COVID and non-COVID, or potential COVID and non-COVID, and creating a level 1 facility, all of which just makes and enables the management of the flow of patients through the hospital more effective. But that obviously doesn't take away the individual's anxieties and then the personal impact of caring for very sick patients. So, Getch, could you just talk a little bit about the enhanced health and wellbeing support as well?
Yes, a particular focus has been not only on physical health, as Nancy said, but also psychological health. And so, as you know, we were putting a lot of support, both face-to-face and online. We also have mental health first aiders, and then we've also introduced TRIM, which is really around training our staff around that immediacy when people kind of need some help. We also introduced wobble rooms, so when people just needed those 10-minute break just to gather their thoughts before they had to go back onto the wards. But we're continuing to learn and see what else we needed to introduce, because we absolutely recognise that for some people the effects will be long-lasting. And so there's loads of apps that we have introduced and put on our intranet around headspace, meditation, but we absolutely recognise we need to keep doing more.
Thank you very much, Getch, and an important question, and putting our people right at the heart, and ensuring our people are looked after well is going to ensure our patients get the best outcomes and best results. Apologies again for some of the glitches, IT glitches that we've had at the start and through this. I hope this has been useful and informative. Thank you very much for everybody who's been listening, and thank you very much for those who have asked questions. So if there's no further questions, I'll hand over to Steve Clark, our chairman, just to close it down. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance. And if I could just underline the comments in closing that Lance made earlier about thanks to our patients and to our partners and to our people for all that they did to support us last year. Lance rightly talked about the more general achievements of last year rather than picking out very specific achievements, and I fully endorse that. And those achievements and everything else that PAHT achieved in 1920 has only been made possible by the hard work, the commitment and the passion to deliver high quality care to our patients by everyone at PAH. And I thank them all for that. They have been amazing and they continue to be amazing. And final comments, if I could thank those of you who have joined us today and for your contributions by question and otherwise in the Q&A box. That's very helpful. Thank you. And for those who are watching this on a recorded medium, thank you for taking the interest and logging in or whatever you do to see them. Good afternoon and goodbye.